So Fons, thank you very much for taking the time to do an interview with us with relation to your keynote at OEB on December 2nd. We're really looking forward to hearing from you there, but it's great to have a chance already to hear a bit about your work. And yeah, we have some questions for you as well already. So the first question would be, based on your work and insights, what kind of cultural differences have you actually seen globally around how people learn?
Yeah, that's a nice question to start with. By the way, wonderful to be part of that discussion on the 2nd of December. What I've found is, for example, the use of cases. And it's interesting because there are, Harvard has in their management education have been famous about that in case studies. California, most of the US is give us an experience and then we'll generalize about it in a model. But if you start with the case in France, and I'm stereotyping on purpose to make things very clear, they get a bit nervous. And are you serious? You start with the model and then you might do a case, but after you have seen the model and see if the model is good enough and it helps you in the case. So it's interesting that Kolb is a circle as a learning circle, but and that's the beauty of a circle, there are different entry points in the circle. And the entry point is very often dictated by the culture you're in.
Yeah.
And I hope you like the story. Is that there was this brilliant MBA student from Harvard that got a job. And the boss, his new boss, said, okay, you're already on 100,000 a year, Harvard students. And so I'll give you a complex task. Anyway, the task after 2 months was, or supposed to be finished. And he goes back to the boss and the boss says, and give me the results. He said, I couldn't solve the task. And then the boss said, but why not? And he said, because I never had that case. So there are limits to case studies anyway.
Exactly, yeah, I can imagine that's a big impact seeing as to where you then enter the circle and what you're prepared for also when learning as a student, so to say.
Very much so. Very much so. And another example is the use of digital tools. You see that some cultures are more high touch and they really want face-to-face because learning is much more than only content. It's the style, it's the respect for the professor, and they need to be part of the whole package. While in other cultures, who cares? And I'm exaggerating again, I'm making things very black and white. Give us the content, Zoom is fine. It's even more effective than face-to-face. I think at the end, learning needs to combine the two.
Yeah, so to actually jump into that, so if you say, well, we've seen massive disruption, of course, in the whole education and training sector with regards to the pandemic and how we were able to respond and to adapt. And that's, of course, also influenced by our cultures where we are coming from. So do you think that our culture in this way can help translate a dilemma into an opportunity, so to say, like how people have responded?
Very much so. And I would rephrase that a little. I think if you have a multicultural set of students, that creates dilemmas. But we need at the universities, for example, the higher educational institutes, we need to think about how can we bring those different needs together. And that's called dilemma reconciliation. So let me not go immediately to the results, but ask the right questions. Namely, the right question is, how can I use digital to deepen the relationship that is personal? And how can the personal relationships face-to-face help us to use digital more effectively? And if we ask those questions, you get out of, should it be digital or should it be face-to-face? No, how can one help the other? And that is what I would like to discuss with a lot of examples on the 2nd of December.
Yeah, so definitely. So this topic actually of like collaboration and social connectivity, that will also be part of the agenda in different sessions, as part of like sessions and presentations from different people. So can you say actually why do you place such a great emphasis on connecting different viewpoints? Like what are your methods of doing so? Why do you find it such a like important issue?
Yeah, no. First of all, it's important for me personally to survive because I was born out of a French mother and a Dutch father. So, you know, there were different viewpoints. The respect for your grandparents, etc. And I love both families. So almost by learning implicitly, I knew how important it was to connect different viewpoints. Now, let me give the answer by an example. The example is that about 25 years ago, I was doing a workshop in Tokyo, in Japan. And the question was, what is your big worry, the big challenge at the moment in Japan? And they said, it's the Americans telling us we need to be more objective because we are in the financial sector. And the Americans are warning us against the financial crisis in Asia. Don't forget, about 25 years ago. And so what's the problem? Now, we Japanese, and I'm using my own words, obviously, we are more subjective. It's about people we know. It's about relationships we have. And that worries the Americans, and that's why they say you need to be more objective. Now, what we found, the Japanese said, we don't have a good word for objectivity. It doesn't exist in Japanese. So we borrowed it from the Chinese, and we call it kyakanteki. Kyakanteki means the outsider's viewpoint. For the cynical Japanese, the American viewpoint. That's objective. And subjectivity is shukanteki, because kanteki is viewpoint, shu is the insider's viewpoint. And so we said we have a dilemma. We have the Americans and we have the Japanese viewpoints, kyakanteki, shukanteki. And what they did for the reconciliation, and that's very interesting, is they drew a Japanese bridge like you find in the Japanese garden. Mm-hmm. And they said, if you look at the top of the Japanese bridge, you see a square. Yeah. That's American. If you look from the side of the bridge, you see a trapezium. That's Japanese. But it's united on a higher level of insight, the bridge. And the Japanese garden is an invitation to connect viewpoints. And that is what reality should be. Because a bridge is not only square, it's at the same time a trapezium, but you realize you can unite it on a higher level. And that's why tunnel vision is only the square, yeah? And you need to connect more viewpoints to get a better insight into reality.
Yeah, so in that sense, I mean, I know you're speaking at a lot of events and conferences and for groups of people. So if you think about like, what do you hope to take away from OEB yourself? If you think about, there will be people sharing and discussing different viewpoints. So could you say something about this?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. What always excites me is two things. When you at least inspire people, but inspiration could also be an excuse for not practicing, right? So if people are not only inspired, but also say, I would do one or two little things differently. And what I hope is that they communicate that. So if you say, what do you want to get out of this? Is that people are inspired, but that they also inform me about where the inspiration led to in what they did. So if there is a university professor saying, oh, I did my teaching a bit different because of what you said there, right? Or I have a multicultural group and should I start with a case or with a model? Now, I'll talk about that on the second, because at the end it doesn't matter as long as you don't take it too long. It's interesting, but I'm now more effective in dealing with multicultural groups. So that would be my hope.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. That sounds perfect. Let me have a quick look also if I've... actually, I have one other question that I would still like to ask you. You've written extensively on cultural diversity and cross-cultural competencies for many years. So have you seen any trends or developments actually recently that make you, let's say, hopeful or excited?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. Let me explain why.
Yeah.
Because I see both trends in parallel. There are hopeful things, I'll end with that, but there are also things that worry me. And what worries me is that we see a lot of polarization. You know, what happened in America, what happened in the UK after Brexit. You split countries in two. There is almost a civil war, you know, at least psychologically, that people don't like to talk with each other anymore and they just repeat their own polar view, right? And that worries me. So that's what I'm seeing happening almost everywhere, yeah, including in Europe. On the other hand, I've seen with digitalization also very hopeful things happening, is that people unite on a higher level. Perhaps your conference is a good example, that people learn from each other increasingly because of digitalization. You know, it's a bit like social media is a blessing, but it's also a curse at the same time. Because people can shout anything without any reference and they hurt a lot of people. But it's only a little minority with a big mouth, you know. But it's a blessing that people can connect worldwide without any hindrance. So it's that would be my answer. It's troublesome, and we really need to do something about it. On the other hand, there are glimmers of hope.
Yeah, well, that's something good to know. And then finally, lastly, I mentioned already, like OEB's overall theme this year is learning resilience. Could you say something about which thoughts or maybe questions this instigates for you? Like, and also, do you believe resilience can be learned or taught?
Yeah, I think so. It can also be helped by creating a context where the chance of being resilient is increased. Yeah. In general, I believe that resilience is increased by combining opposites like digital versus analog, like privacy versus transparency, like individual versus group learning, etc. So for me, my definition of resilience, by the way, if it would be globalization, I would say the same. I'm a hammer and everything looks like a nail. Is that if you reconcile dilemmas, if you find the Japanese bridge rather than only the square or the trapezium, you're in great shape. And that is something that I would define as resilience, because polarization is only part of it. And you can polarize digital and analog, but it's wonderful if you bring them together in a hybrid form or in a reconciled form, like they call that blended learning. You're much more resilient. And errors and correcting the errors is the essence of learning. It's not having errors, and it's not only correcting, it's combining the two so that the exceptional errors makes you learn. And that increases your resilience.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for this like final insight now. And we're really looking forward, as said, to hearing from you in December in Berlin. And yeah, much appreciate the chance to have this conversation with you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, Jana, and it's a pleasure to be interviewed by you.